Hello, my name is Jake Marchese. Today we're going to be flying the PA42 Cheyenne multi-engine turboprop in IFR conditions. So we're at night, eighth of mile visibility, and we're going to make it. We're going to fly from Aurora Municipal Airport, and we're going to fly to O'Hare International Airport. So this aircraft was made around 1990s to 2000s. It's a pretty nice aircraft, and you know, I really enjoy it. So let's get started here. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna, you know, turn on the lights. I turn on the battery, and we're gonna set everything up here. So I have the lights on. I have interior, exterior on. So oil coolers are gonna go open. Ice protection's gonna come on, so we can test it right away. That's again, that's just a personal preference. I like to do that, but I don't know how it is for real. But that's what a checklist dictates on one of my aircraft. So bleed air is going to come on, ignition is going to come to auto, and we're going to set the generators to off position, and fuel pumps are off. Then we're going to move up here. All heating elements for surface, pitot and static, and windshield heat, that's going to remain off just so we don't kill the battery here. We're going to turn on some sensors, elevator trim, radar altimeter, as you can see. So the radar altimeter, this will tell us, this is an altimeter here that tells you how high you are, and it's set to sea level. But this, in fact, it tells you exactly how high you are off the ground. So say we have mountains shaped like this, and we're flying here. Right now, say we're exactly 2,000 feet AGL, and then the mountain comes up to here, we're 1,000 feet AGL. You can see it goes from 2,000 to 1,000. So this altimeter would stay the same because it measures air density. This would change from 2,000 to 1,000 AGL, and then as you can see, it gets a little bit more precise. We go from 500s of feet all the way to hundreds. So we're gonna see this little orange card come away after we flip this switch, and that's gonna come on. We're gonna turn on our prop auto feather, so that way if we do lose an engine when we feather the prop, it's a system that ensures that the prop feathers in so that it's as little resistance in case we lose that engine, so that it's minimal drag, so we can go a little bit further if we have to. Next, we can start testing some stuff. So annunciators, we can test the annunciators, and that's our master warning that goes off. Kind of annoying here. So let's go for that again. Just look at everything, make sure it all lights up. Everything lit up here. Let me take a look at it one more time. Okay, we're good. We're good with that. And we can test our stall indicators. So that's right here. And we're going to see one go off right here. That goes off. So we're good. Windshield wipers are going to be off. Don't need them at all. They're unarmed at the moment. That's just someone else coming out in the taxiway. And everything else is good, looking good here. We can go ahead and test the flaps. So the flaps are right here. We have our indicator and our flaps. So we're going to set to approach. And we can set to full. And I'm just gonna, you know, cycle those as we're going here, and we can move on to starting our engines. Flaps are good, and we can check our fuel selectors. Fuel selectors are on. Everything else looks good here, and we can move on to starting the engine. So we're gonna check for fuel pressure. Fuel pressure is right here. And you can see these are our stacks for our engine instrumentation. You have torque, interstage turbine temperature, which is just the temperature of the inside portion of the engine. Prop RPMs, percent RPM. So this is for the propeller itself. This is for the engine itself. Fuel flow, pounds consumed per hour. Then we have our oil, which is our oil T's and P's. Oil pressure and oil temperature. Pressure, T temperature for T's and P's. And then just to run over some of the equipment, our GPS, we have, let me run over this once we get the avionics cleared up. So here we go. So we're going to turn on the pump, and we're going to ensure that, okay, so here's our switch. We're going to turn this to on, and we're going to make sure we have fuel pressure displayed here. We have fuel pressure set to start, and you can see our percent RPMs are going to start coming up. Once we get to 12%, we're going to start. Here we go. And you can see we have our propeller turning here. Torque is coming up. We're going to bring up the condition lever a little bit just to start the engine. All right, here we go. Torque is coming down. So we're going to have green, green, gray, green, green. That's just how I remember where everything should be. So you can see our torque. Now we're going to test our, we're going to be testing the, so let me actually set the starter to generator. That way we're charging the battery with the engine. Ignition to auto, bleed air on, ice protection. You can see that's going to mess with the torque a little bit. So you can see right here we're going to have a spike and a drop. There it goes right there. It works. Oil cooler is going to stay open, and we can start turning on heating elements, pitot, stall, left and right, and windshield heat to low since we're in IFR conditions. And it's a little bit colder. And then we're going to proceed to turn on the avionics. So avionics 1, and then we're going to turn it off so that we can ensure avionics 2 comes on and everything is shown. That pops these up, everything here turns on. And the reason why I turn this on and then off and then turn this on, excuse me, is so we know that when I turn this on and then I turn this on after, you can see nothing happens to the avionics, so I can make sure both systems are operational. So both systems will run all systems individually. That's perfect, so avionics are in good shape. And then we have our radios, COM 1 and 2, nav 1 and 2, and we also have some right here on our GPS. This is our GPS here. And then we have our transponder. This is DME, or distance measuring equipment, right here. So that will tell us how far we are from what we set up with our navigation equipment, how fast we are going, and ETA, or estimated time arrival, or ETE, estimated time en route. That just kind of says if you're this far out at this airspeed, you'll arrive here around this time. And that hooks up right to here, as you can see. And then we have an ADF receiver, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not very familiar with that system. I don't use it that often. We're just going to keep moving on here. So we're going to turn on our next engine. So same process. Fuel pump's going to come on, fuel pressure, start. And you can see our percent RPMs are coming up here. Once we get to 12%, this dash right here, we're gonna set our, here we go. We can bring up our condition lever and check everything else out here. Green, green. Okay, torque is coming up a little bit. We're looking good here. And we can set up our engines, everything else. So auto, check for our ice protection. Set to generator. Everything else looks good. And both sides have to match. So forward, forward, down, down. Forward, forward. Everything looks good. These are all on. Lights are on. And even have, yeah, we're good. Okay, and you can see when we turn off our generator here, this one should compensate. That looks good. And we should see the same thing on the other side. This compensates when this becomes inactive, and we can start testing some other systems here. Might as well just skip just to speed up the process here, but okay. Everything looks set for flight, and we can turn on prop phase. That's this knob right here. So this gyro pressure and pneumatic are set. Prop phase, we're going to turn that on, and what that is basically is it ensures the propeller RPM. Say you're giving it power, you grab both throttles and you push them forward. Well, they're not going to be within a millimeter of each other. They're not going to be right next to each other, so the engines are going to have slightly different RPMs, and that can be an issue if you push the left forward a little bit more than the right or earlier. So what that ensures is that it recognizes that, and it sort of it syncs the engines as much as it can, as would other systems on other aircraft and stuff. So we're gonna turn that on. Fuel looks good. Oxygen pressure looks good. That's this round dial here. Here's our fuel quantity. Everything else checks out. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So yeah, I'm gonna, just to speed up the process, we're not gonna taxi. I'm just gonna spawn us right on the runway. So you can see we're right here. Okay, so it just spawned us on the runway right here. We were originally right here and had to taxi around. We're set. So here we go. It should load pretty quickly. We change the location to 1/8 mile. Okay. So this runway's pretty long, so we're not going to need to use flaps on this takeoff. As you can see, it's labeled approach and down. You know, so it's you don't it could be labeled takeoff. Some aircraft have that, you know, it kind of gives you a clue. And this aircraft's pretty powerful, so we shouldn't have a problem with that. Everything looks good. Condition levers, those are going to come all the way up. We have them at low idle, which means we're putting minimal fuel into the engine just to keep it running for efficiency. We're going to bring it all the way up to high idle, and we're set. So I'm just going to call out some stuff here. We're going to call check thrust, and you can see both engines are, power's coming up a little bit. The burn, or turbine temperatures are good. And once we get to 800, I'll release the brakes, full power. Power's coming up, engines are synced. Airspeed's alive. Power set. 80 knots cross-check. Cross-check means I know both airspeed indicators on two different pitot stack systems are operating correctly. V1 rotate, V2 kind of skip those with the explanation there. Gears coming up. With the landing gear come up the landing and taxi lights, which means we're going to turn them off since we don't need them. Power's going to come back out of the red a little bit. Prop RPMs are going to come back to 1900 just so we can, because the pitch of the propeller blade, the more it's pitched into the relative wind, the more drag we have. So to increase efficiency, bring it back a little, and it gives you a little bit more airspeed if you need it. So here we are right here. We're looking good. And we can go ahead and turn to a heading of 045 out of runway 9er. And this aircraft, by the way, very difficult to stay coordinated. So if you see the inclinometer right here going crazy, that's expected. All right, airspeed and power are both looking good. And we can go ahead and set our DME. So we're at, we actually overshot our heading. I don't know what's wrong with me here, but let me get back on that heading. And we're leveling off. I'm going to keep nosing up here just so we can get to 4,000 feet. And I'm going to give a little bit of power. You can see our DME here. I'm going to switch and just set our frequency to 11.1. And you can see right here, it sets us up 24 nautical miles out, 172 knots. We are 8 minutes. We're going to be at the airport in around 8 minutes. So I'm going to nose down just since we let the nose up a little bit. Airspeed's coming back. I'm going to try to keep it around 170. And again, we can just, even though I check again for landing gear and flaps to make sure they're up. You need to keep looking at that stuff. It's very important. All right, we're looking good. We're almost at 4,000. And we can set this to, we can dial this into 094, which is our the heading for our runway, so that's going to be right about there. And we're coming in pretty good. Overshot my heading again, that's okay. We're not that far off. Everything's looking good. Engines are looking good. Instruments are looking good. And another thing to take into account, as I said, 80 knots cross-checked. There are two different pitot tubes on this aircraft, and each airspeed indicator operates on a different pitot tube. And when you're doing that, you have to make sure that, say, one of them is blocked, and one is not, and they are both fully functional, minus one being blocked. One is going to read something different than the other, so you need to make sure both of these read a true value, and both of them are at the same exact value. So we can level off at 4,000 feet here, and the reason for that is because you want that's important, obviously. So we can zoom in here all the way just so I don't know where I'm at. Oh, zoom out. I can find the airport. I know this route pretty good. Airspeed's coming up a little, and we're almost there. So once we start seeing, now let me actually pause this for a moment here. You can see we have, this is called a CDI, or course deviation indicator, and I hooked it up to the DME. And one thing you'll notice, this is a this selects our NAV1, NAV2, and DME. So this selects what you want. So say you tune in your nav frequency right here, and you use that to for your ILS approach on your runway. Then this will that will hook up to this, but you need to make sure, even if you have that frequency in, this will show nothing. So you need to make sure if you tune into nav 1 to for your approach, this you select to nav 1. If you want nav 2, then you have to select nav 2. If you want DME, in this case we do, you select DME. And then some other stuff to note. So we have, this is called an ADF right here, or an automatic or automated direction finder. That tells us exactly where we are. I mean, exactly where we should be. So for example, we're aiming, right, this is where our aiming point. So this is our ILS feather, as I like to call it. This green, these two beams coming out, that's our ILS feather. And that ADF, or automated or automatic direction finder, that points to the foot of that. So you can see right here where it kind of has a point that comes together. So that's pointing to that. So relatively, you're aiming for that. That's sort of where you're aiming. So using that indicator, that's telling you exactly where to go in a way. You know, you're aiming for the foot of the runway, even though that's all at the other end, but still. And then this just tells you, you know, that everything. This is our this tells us how high or low we are on the glide slope, and this tells us if we are to the left or right. And also, if you're flying, if say this is to the left, you're going to point your airplane to the left to get to that, to center this. If you're too high, that means that this will be here, so you need to nose down towards that triangle to get there, so that you can bring it to the center, and vice versa. And we're going for vice versa right now. So we're just going to stay on, we're going to stay at 4,000, and we're going to maintain that altitude. And since we are too low, because we have to chase upward, we're going to just stay at this altitude. So if we're coming in here, we're going to intercept the glide slope like this, and then we're going to follow in and descend it. So we're here, and we're going to follow in, and we're going to come down with the glide slope to the runway. So we could go up and line ourselves up, but there's no point in doing that if you can intercept it. So if you want to do that, that's great. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Another thing, avionics, this is our storm scope, so that gives us some precipitation trend, or, you know, cloud coverage in a sense, you know, so it's good to have if you're flying in IFR conditions. But, and you can even adjust the range on that, the tilt, so for different altitudes, this and that. But we're coming in here pretty good. So we are 16.1 nautical miles out, and that's just an inner marker annunciation from a different airport. So that's going to go off for, okay, there it goes. So we have an outer marker. You can see an outer marker, an inner marker. I'm sorry, outer, middle, inner. Even though that's OAM, but that's just, that enunciates. So outer is b, 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 and then you have inner, which is da, 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 and then inner, it's just a beep, 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 beep. But that, what that is that's, when you hear that, and if you're properly established on the glide slope, on your way into the runway, that's going to go off letting you know you are where you should be. And when you hear it at that moment, you know when it goes off where you should. It goes off when you are at a certain point along the glide slope, so it gives you a sense in where you're at. For example, outer, you have just intercepted it. Inner, you should be coming in to ground effect soon. I don't know the altitudes and distance from where these are, from where your touchdown point, and then inner, that means get ready for touchdown. You're going to be landing within a minute. So here we go. You can see our CDI is coming in right here. So we're going to bank to intercept that. That was kind of a steep bank, but that's fine. So we've established ourselves properly on that. So let me get back to 4,000 here. And I'm going to come in. Hold on. We're going to, yeah, I'm being really rough on the controls here. Not that's a bad thing, but you know, it's good to have smoother inputs. And you can see we're coming in on our glide slope, and where we should be established on the glide slope. And now the other thing you want to take into account, your glide slope, so that's going to be sloped downward. So if you want to stay aligned at the altitude you should be at, so if you want to stay at the altitude you should be at, that little yellow triangle for your CDI, if you're maintaining altitude that's going to start going downward, which means you need to chase it downward. So you're going to need to maintain a descent rate to keep that aligned. If here's your glide slope, if you need to stay aligned laterally, that's gonna stay the same, and all you need to do is just stay level and maintain that heading. But for your vertical alignment, you need to keep it. You need to manage and maintain a descent rate if you want to keep that centered. So these are just basics on how you use these instruments. That's all that is. So we're just going to start coming in here. You can see we're aligning pretty good. And I'm going to bring the airspeed back because we're way too fast here. But our descent rate is looking pretty good for the airspeed we're at. And I can start to bank in a little bit. And here we go. So now we have pretty much established ourselves on the glide slope, both altitude, descent rate, and laterally. So we're coming right in now. I just have to find the proper alignment here and maintain it. And airspeed, as you can see, is coming back. I brought back the power a little bit just so we can get within maximum landing gear extension speed, which means I'm going to bring the gear down. There's a certain speed in which the landing gear will rip off if you let it out too fast. So it not only is important to bring your airspeed back for landing, but for certain things such as that. So you have, of course, maximum flap operating speed. That's measured by the white arc on the airspeed indicator. But for the landing gear, maximum extension speed for the landing gear, that is not marked at all. So that's something you need to know. And in this aircraft, it is 174 knots of indicated airspeed. So as long as you know where that is, you should be good. And you can see we're at 2,500 feet. We're descending through that, so airspeed needs to come back even more. Landing and taxi lights can come on. We're looking pretty good here. Landing gear is coming down. And you can hear that's our outer marker. So you can see this blue light, that's our outer marker, as I explained earlier. And landing gear, 3 green lights. Landing and taxi lights, even though I know, let's look again, checked on. Looking good, and we can, again, I'm going to have to chase this a little bit since I got off a little bit. This one's looking pretty good. Alright, so we're 3.3 nautical miles out. That's not bad. And I'm going to keep the airspeed around 130 to 140 just to keep the airspeed up. First notch of flaps is going to come down since that's more drag. Airspeed is going to come back. To maintain that airspeed I want, I'm going to give it a little bit of power. So you can see we're coming back to 127, 128, somewhere around there. I'm going to increase power. And we're going to keep descending here. Bring the aircraft over to the left a little since my bar is to the left. That's we're going to point the aircraft towards the direction the bar is off center. And we're going to bring it back in a little bit. That looks good. So we're going to maintain that right there. Just keep coming this way. There we go. That looks good. Center. Second notch of flaps. We can see that's coming down okay. We're way too high. Let's lose a little bit of altitude. If I want to pitch down a little bit more, power needs to come out so I don't gain too much airspeed and rip off the flaps. 9/10 of a mile out at 148 knots. We're within the white arc. We have full flaps and gear is down. 3 green. Engines are looking good. Everything looks okay. We're aligned perfectly. Altitude-wise, you don't need to be perfect, but you should still be right on it. That's our inner marker, which means we should be expecting to come in ground effect. Level off a little bit. Here we go. Give it a little bit of power, and we should be coming in. Here we go. This way. Hold on one moment. We're way too far over. There we go. We just landed on the side of the runway. Oh god, that was embarrassing. I've never had something like that in a while. That was awful. Thrust reversers are engaged, power's coming back. You can see we have red and white. That means that we are almost at the end of the runway. We can go ahead and exit right here. Disengage that. Okay. That was a terrible landing. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. Alright. The airplane's okay. I really ground looped it, not with the brakes, but with the rudder. And I almost went off the runway. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But overall, I came in pretty good. And you can see right here, we can go on flight analysis. And so to do that, you click escape on Prepar3d and you go to flight analysis. And you can see right here, this is our where we flew. So we took off from runway 9er, and you can see we kind of I came off the center line a little bit when I lifted off, but that's okay. I came up, I turned to 045, I'm sorry, 3030, and then I corrected that. You can see where I corrected it right there. So this is a good way to look over what you did. And then I came a little bit far off from the departure keyhole, as I like to call it. That's just an extension of airspace. And then here you can see we swung wide a little bit, but I realigned it and I kept it aligned for the most part. And then we came right in, and that's right where I was a little bit off this way, and then I overcorrected and I swung a little bit wide. And this line is not the actual dimensions of the runway, so I don't think I came off the runway. And you can see I ate up a lot of runway. Normally I don't eat up that much runway, but in this case, you know, I shouldn't have, but I did. And then I still made it on the ground safely, and I didn't slam it down. And you can see down here, you can see this is just sort of where our altitude ranged at. So we are climbing at a pretty steady rate, which is good. It's not all over the place. It's pretty constant. Came in, leveled off at 4,000, which is right about this tick mark, so that's good for the most part, and came right in along the glide slope. So you can see right here, this line, that's our ILS feather, come right in over here, and then came down a little bit. So that's again, this is a great way to track what you did and see how you're doing over time. So say you practice over and over. If you actually save all your flights and you go to your pilot records and you look into all that, this is a great way to look at how you're doing and how that's sort of what I like to do. And it even tells you at middle markers and outer markers, you can see these purple beams. That tells you where you are. So middle marker, that's what we intercepted over DuPage from a different airport. As you remember, it went off early, and then we intercepted outer and then middle. So that's again, that's I guess you could say it shows up on this too. But again, and the other thing